Welcome to the Grove Podcast, where we feature Evergreen members and their real-life stories of salvation, transformation, struggle, and hope. I'm Joy Gabbert, and today we get the privilege of hearing from Justin and Megan Schell. So welcome to the Grove.
Hi.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. We're also going to be joined by Andrew, my husband, today, just to help with the conversation and asking questions. So why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about your family and how long you've been at Evergreen, where you serve and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we've been married 22 years. That's right, yeah?
Yes.
All right, I got it. 22 years. We've got a son, Henry, who's 17, and a daughter, Evie, who will be 15 in just a few days. Oh.
So she'll be 15 when your episode comes out.
Yes, maybe today's her birthday in the future. And so we've been at Evergreen for about 4 years now. And let me see, where do we serve? We are members of, I think it's the Leadership 4 Sunday school class.
Sure. AJ Gonzalez is
Sunday school class.
Sunday school class.
So we get to go there and are starting to get to integrate more into that community. I help with institute classes and teach every so often to fill in for youth or reach, and then serve as well, helping Evergreen kind of reimagine and think strategically about what our global mission engagement looks like.
Awesome.
And I disciple young adults in the Reach community. I have a couple that aren't that young, moving up my age range. But I disciple a few ladies. I lead a women's Bible study on Monday nights, which is great. Please come. And that at VBS every summer, which I love because I'm not normally with kids. I'm with young women.
Yeah.
But have found that to be a great joy as well. So
good. Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear your guys' story today. So Megan, why don't we go ahead and just start with you and your childhood?
So I grew up here in Tulsa. I have a younger sister. We were not a church-going family. And so the first time that I actually started going to church was after my parents divorced. I was 9 when they split up, and when my dad and stepmom were looking to get married, we attended Asbury, and we'd go to Sunday school. And during a Sunday school class, I was in 5th grade by that time, and they announced the next year I could go into youth group and talked about all these fun games and music and activities on an evening. And so, of course, at 11, I was like, yeah, that sounds so fun. And so once I got to 6th grade, I started going to youth group on Sunday evenings, and they had a fall retreat for middle schoolers. And I went, and it was the first time that I heard the gospel for myself spoken to me. And the man, I can still see him. He was like this 6'8", blonde-head dude that was just very excited about sharing the gospel. And he told the gospel in a way that said, God loves you no matter what, and he's offering you this free gift. And I thought to myself, why would anyone say no to that? At that point, I think my heart was just really broken as a little girl, kind of the breaking up of a family, no matter how good or right it is. It's heartbreaking, and there was a healing that immediately started to take place for me to feel like I belonged to someone. I belonged to someone who knew me. And so it was a really significant moment in my life. It took hold, if you will, even at 11. Mm-hmm. And so I started going to Asbury all the time. I was there every Wednesday, every Sunday. I was part of the youth for a long time, and grew in loving the Word as well. And so by the time I got kind of halfway through high school, Asbury is also very mission-minded, and so I started learning more about what that looked like. And I met another student who introduced me to a ministry called the Voice of the Martyrs, and I started getting their free magazine and praying for the world through their magazine. And so as a teenager, I started to develop a heart for the world through those few things. And it, again, was a significant, unexpected, but now I can look back and see a significant part of my story and what God was doing in my life because I decided I wanted to be a missionary. Before then, I thought missions was just like spring break trips or like events. I didn't realize it could be a career. And so as a teenager, I began to really plan to be a missionary. And at first, the idea was to go to Moody Bible Institute. But one day coming home from church, I was like, Lord, I don't think I've asked your will for this. I'm sorry. And in the rare occasions that I have really sensed God speak to me, he spoke in that moment and said, OU. And I was like, that's cute. I did not want to go to OU. I was too good for OU. Like, my arrogance was very high. My parents were the kind of parents who were like, do whatever you want, go where, we want to shoot for the stars kind of stuff. My family had money at the time, and so it did seem like nothing was in my way. So OU was never at the top of the list.
Sure.
But I treated it like this Abraham and Isaac moment. I was like, I know God's just gonna, I'll apply out of faith, and then you'll go. But you got into Moody anyway. So April Fool's Day of 1999, I got a reject letter from Moody Bible Institute, and the Lord was gracious to send me to OU. There were things that began at OU that I could not have ever imagined. And so I can stop there because then we get into we meet.
Yeah, sure. Before we go there,
Sure.
though, can you maybe talk a little bit about your home life and how, because I believe that's kind of where some of your anxiety, like wanting to do things your own way and things like that started. Can you speak on that just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question because I think it does play a significant role in even where I am today. I'm a firstborn. I have a firstborn mom and a great parents, but I did feel hyper responsible for things growing up. Again, and everybody's different how they respond to divorce. I kind of went insular, and so I didn't trust my parents because at that young age, they kind of, for better or worse, broke trust. And so I started to take care of myself. I also had a younger sister who was challenging, and I could see her getting in trouble a lot and did the very smart thing of going, well, I will do the opposite of all that. But also felt, once I became a Christian, also I felt a need to make sure that they knew about Jesus and that Shannon, my sister, what's going to happen to her. I need to take care of her. I have this responsibility. And a little bit of that was influenced by the same kind of heart that my mom has for her family. Like, she's a firstborn, has always felt responsible for her family. So it kind of seeped in that way. And then it kind of hit a pinnacle when I was a senior in high school. I had the great honor of becoming homecoming queen at my high school. And for whatever reason, that was actually the last straw on my stress and anxiety reserve. And so I had my first panic attack at 17 after I became homecoming queen, because I think at that time I had developed such a self-perception of perfection. Like, I had to be perfect. One, for my family, I need to be perfect to put Jesus on display. And now my whole high school kindly, generously had seen good in me and given me this accolade. But I also was like, well, I do not deserve that. And so now I'm exposed. And so my body just started to overreact to stress. And so that began a long history of figuring that out. It started at 17.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Justin, let's jump over to you. And why don't you tell us about your childhood?
Sure. Yeah, I am the youngest of four. I grew up in Monticello, Arkansas, southeast corner, and was a part of a family that We went to church on Sundays, but faith really didn't seep into the rest of life. It was just something you did. And so I fell into just that pattern too. I go to church on Sundays, and the rest of my week I live for myself, which didn't seem too bad when I was younger. But then as I got older, began to continue to live for myself and live that double life of, I'm a Christian, I go to church, but I live for myself. How does that work? And so going to college, I remember saying to myself, I'm going to stop living this double life. I'm just totally going to live for myself. Everyone else says, I'm going to stop living this double life and start living for Jesus. I'd said the other thing. But I get to the University of Central Arkansas, UCA, and there were some guys in my fraternity that were living their faith in a way that was compelling and real, and that had an impact on me. And then one day I'm sitting at lunch, and a guy walks up and says, "Hey, can I sit with you?" Sure. He looked like maybe an upperclassman. Turns out he was on staff with a campus ministry called Student Mobilization, or STUMO. Mm-hmm. And he's just making small talk, but eventually asks, "Do you have any spiritual interests?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I'm a Christian," because I'm not a Muslim. So what else would I be? Yeah, I'm a Christian. And he didn't question that or blink. He just said, "Oh, great, I am too. Would you like to get together, pray, and read the Bible?"
Trapped.
And at the time, exactly, I thought, well, I'll say yes, and then I'll blow him off later, because that's the kind of person I was. But we met, and next thing you know, a semester goes by. We're still meeting. We're still reading the Bible together. We're still praying together. And what I didn't know at the time, in many ways, he was discipling me to the faith. He didn't even, I don't think he knew that.
He assumed you were a Christian.
He assumed I was a Christian. This guy's reading the Bible, said he was a Christian. But he was really discipling me to the faith. And next thing you know, summer after first year of college, the Lord gets a hold of me and moves me from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of his beloved Son. Mm-hmm. And I get back to campus, and what I know is I want to know God. I want to help my fraternity brothers know him. I want to, I'll help lead a Bible study in my dorm. Just a 180 in my life. And even then, as a new believer, maybe the last thing I'll share at this point is I began to hear about God's heart for the nations. There was a presentation where the speaker, I think he had like 45 minutes, and he walked from Genesis to Revelation, and all he did was unpack how from the beginning to the very end of the Bible, God is pursuing a people made up of men and women from every tribe, language, people, and nation. That mission isn't this one-hit wonder at the end of Matthew. It actually stretches from eternity to eternity, or at least Genesis to Revelation in Scripture. And I remember hearing that, and as a new believer just saying, well, man, if that's what God's doing, then I guess I've got to be a part of that. Because I'm a Christian. I'm really a Christian now. I'm not just pretending. And so verses like Matthew 24:14 were powerful for me. Jesus is saying that, he says, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Because he's being asked, Jesus, when will the end come? When will you return? And he says, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. And I, again, a new believer, don't know a lot, but just remember thinking, man, history's kind of waiting for this. You know, this is what the church is supposed to be doing in this era. So really begin to move that direction. Not knowing a lot, but just saying, okay, I'm gonna move that direction and see what God does.
Yeah. Amazing. So you guys were obviously in different places, didn't know each other at this point, but there was some event happening that you both heard about. And what was that?
So Justin was at the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, and I was at University of Oklahoma in Norman. And what happened was this ministry came through both our campuses called the Traveling Team. The Traveling Team still exists. They go campus to campus, and they speak at mostly secular campuses like OU or UCA at your Cru or your Wesley Foundation or your BCM as the special event speaker about God's heart for the world and how God has been on mission from Genesis to Revelation. And they then will meet with students who are interested in more information afterwards the next day. So, you have your 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Cru meeting, which was mine. I was involved in Cru. And the next day, they spend the whole day sitting in the student union setting up 1-hour appointments. And so I set up a 1-hour appointment. I'd already met the guy who ran the traveling team as a student. He was a special speaker at one of our youth retreats. And so I was excited to see him again. And I'd already, as I said in high school, had a heart for the world. And so when I met with him, he remembered me. He's from Tulsa, Broken Arrow area as well. So shout out Todd Arend. And so it was great. It felt like a connection that I'd been missing for that first. So I'd been in college a semester and they came my second semester. And so what they usually did was walk through all the mission agencies that they partner with and talking about summer opportunities. So if you want to work with tribals, here's a group that you can do that for 6-8 weeks. Muslims, Chinese, you want to do education, here's a way to teach and that sort of thing. But then they as an organization created what's called the IT Project. IT standing for intensive training. They're real creative, the traveling team, they travel. IT Project is intensive training. So for 7 weeks, they take students out to the LA area. And at that time, and in the year 2000, ancient history, but in 2000, the U.S. Center for World Mission was located in Pasadena, California. And they have like a campus, like not an outdoor dormitory. It's kind of like a motel, and it's really weird, but it's cool as a 19-year-old to go out there, and all the people who are like coming in and out of the mission, like elite force, are coming through there to talk to a guy named Ralph Winter, who was he is the guy who introduced, anybody who knows this, the unreached people group idea.
Yeah.
And so what they do, the IT Project, is that we do a couple of weeks of training with the Perspectives course. So the Perspectives course is a global course. It's usually 15 weeks on God's heart for the world. And this particular one is intense, and so you do it for 15 days.
Wow.
And so every day you go for 3 hours, you hear this leading guy on God's church planting movements or, insider movements or all these like fancy words and missions. And then in the afternoon, we'd read the articles and we'd work on other parts of the class. That's the first half of the IT Project. In the second half, we would then tour the different temples, mosques, et cetera. They're in the LA area. I mean, the largest Buddhist temple in the Western Hemisphere is in the LA County. A huge Hindu temple, things like that. And then we would hear from people who are working in those contexts and how the gospel is being contextualized among Hindus. How are you reaching the Chinese with the gospel? And it was phenomenal. As a student with a heart for the world, I thought that's all I needed. But once I tasted and heard more of the kind of 3D of what God has done and what he's doing, I was like, well, this is it. Like, I don't want to, how could I do anything else? And so during that summer, I had a relationship in high school that broke up during college. I had a kind of a rebound guy that I was seeing before I left for the summer, and was kind of giving up on all of that. I was going to be, Amy Carmichael or somebody really cool like that.
Lottie Moon.
I'm sorry, this is the Baptist, right? The Lottie Moon path. I'm still kind of new. Like grew up.
Hey, Amy Carmichael's great missionary to look up to.
I'm more of a Lilias Trotter. If you don't know who that is, she went to the Arab world as a single woman. So anyway, I was not interested in finding a husband. I was not an MRS degree kind of girl. I'm, again, firstborn, hyper responsible. Yeah. I was myself going to, by myself, save the world. So I don't need anybody.
Right. So you were just ready to go to this missions program and go off
Mm-hmm.
and be a single woman missionary to conquer the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously, that's all God needed.
Yeah.
And then Justin had to show up and be all fine. It was not expected.
And so for those who don't know, according to our Sunday school class, and if our church had a magazine, Justin would be on the front as cutest man of Evergreen award.
There's only one person that has voted on that other than Megan.
Yes.
That's Andrew Layden's shenanigans.
Yes. Apparently,
So he's
you win the
teasing me,
award.
And
it's true.
so don't believe it.
He's very handsome. And he
Well.
was even slightly handsome then, even though he wore his overalls with one strap off
Ooh,
and a little
styling.
soul patch on his
That was really cool back then.
chin.
Any pictures
It
from
wasn't
that era?
ideal, but it worked
I
for
gotta see
me.
those.
It was 2000.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Justin was late to the project. And so it was like only 12 of us. This is our first summer. And all the other guys, either I knew them and like two of the guys came from where I came from. And then another guy was someone's boyfriend who was there. And that was it. The rest were female. And then
So you were like, oh, I'm safe.
I'm so safe. And then Justin walked in. I was like, oh no. But luckily he left halfway through, so he didn't stay the whole summer. So we got along pretty well for the summer. And then I wanted to make sure that he knew where I stood when he left halfway through. He went to China with his church. And so I wrote him a letter. And I said,
Why did you feel like you needed to do that? Was he like acting like he wanted to pursue you?
I had some, I've always before this time had great guy friends. Like really part of my guy group of friends were guys. And once this boyfriend and I had broken up in college, those guy friends started asking me out on dates, and it was kind of disappointing. And so I'm still learning boundaries on friendships with guys.
Yeah.
And so I think I was concerned that I had probably flirted or
Yeah. So you just wanted to
I would
give
just
a
want to
boundary.
make sure that I like him a lot, but I'm not interested in dating you. Please and thank you. I want to please be my friend.
Yeah.
Really, I didn't want to lose a friend. He lived in Arkansas. Like we were not going to see each other. So, but I also enjoyed him. And so I wanted to try and be friends if we could.
Yeah.
Probably I liked him more than that. But at that point, I wasn't willing to say that or even tell myself that. So just wanted to keep things in the right place.
Yeah. Tell us how was your China trip? What were you doing in China?
Yeah, the church I was a part of during college sent me and two other guys for a month to Kunming and Chengdu to work with a ministry there that they had been partnering with. And the ministry was running, during the summers, running English camps for Chinese English teachers. So these were Chinese men and women who were supposed to be teaching others English. Their English wasn't very good, and this was a chance during the summer for them to practice with native English speakers. It was really great structure, and they were doing really neat work. And that part of China it's a blend of the majority Han people, but it's also where a lot of the minority peoples in China, you start to run into more and more of them. So it was really neat to see. And so me and these two guys were sent to sort of scout out what they were doing and be able to come back and talk to the church about short-term opportunities or even long-term opportunities. The other two guys actually ended up going to China long-term as missionaries.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
So what was your impression of Megan? Were you like, when you heard her stipulations and her boundary, were you like, oh man?
we had a great time the first half of the project. So it was a small group. I think we had fun with everyone, but I did enjoy getting to know her and thought she was cute as well. But I actually had just come to faith, as you heard, about not quite a year before. And at that point had committed at least a year to not dating. I'd kind of said, God, I don't want to ruin someone else's life while I'm trying to
Figure it out.
work on me, as we might say these days, but really just focus on following the Lord and learn to be a disciple before moving into dating. And so I was still in the middle of that commitment. And so When she wrote that, I was a little bummed because I did think she was cute and I liked her, but also was like, that's okay. I can't date for a while anyway. And I'm going to China and then Arkansas. And so I just told her, thanks for being clear about your feelings, and that's fine. And I'll let you know if I ever want to pursue something more than that.
Sure. And then, so how did you let her know that?
Well, about actually the following summer, we both went back out to the IT project. I was on staff at that point. I took a year and a half off from university to help the traveling team launch their second team. And so I was staff, and Megan came out as a student leader, and we were both leading small groups. And we had stayed in touch through email during that year. So we had...
And then MSN Messenger.
A little bit of AOL.
What is that? I don't know. Yeah. No, I know what that is.
It's so wild.
This was pre-MySpace.
Text message on your computer.
So we'd stayed in touch that year, and I'd actually gone and visited Norman for Megan's birthday that year. Said hello. Did we see each other over Christmas that year? Was that Urbana? That was...
Urbana 2000.
Yeah, that sounds right.
We went to the biggest mission conference in the U.S. at the time called Urbana, and you were repping the traveling team. I was there as a student, and so again, just mutual friends were there. It wasn't like I was like, oh, Justin's going to be there.
But he showed up at your dorm at one point.
He did, and he
Supplies.
surprised me on my 20th birthday. I was on a date with another guy, a really wonderful guy that I liked. I mean, I had no idea this was going to happen. And so when he showed up, it was a turning point for me at his intentions. I don't think he knew those were his intentions at the time, but the way he came in, he brought me this book, this antique book on Muslim ministry to Muslim women, which is like my sweet spot at the time. And just then the next day, just spent the whole day just going, like, I went tanning because we did that in the 2000s. I went, bought some makeup. He went to the student union. Like, he just hung out with me for the day. And I was like, this is amazing. This guy is great. And then he left. And I knew we'd be spending the summer together. And I was like, well, this will be great. But then he started acting weird at the summer project, probably because he did have feelings for me and didn't know how to act cool. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty direct, and I don't like games, and so I stopped talking to him. I guess that's kind of a game, but I mean, I wasn't gonna entertain the. He was acting like he didn't know me, like we hadn't spent a year, together. And I was like, okay, never mind. We'll just let you do whatever you need to do. And at some point during the summer, we kind of reconciled, and that was nice. And we found that we were both kind of thinking we wanted to be long-term career missionaries in the Muslim world. The Muslim world is a very vast community, but there are at that time, certain mission agencies that focused on that. So we were talking about, I'm thinking about this agency, that agency to work for, and they lined up. And so that was kind of a green flag at the time, going, we're kind of on the same page, even at this point, which was really encouraging. And I told my best friend, I was like, if he asked me out, I'm going to say yes. Mm-hmm.
So there's no dating on the project.
Okay.
So after it ended, a few weeks later, I was going to be in Norman already. And so asked if Megan would go out with me while I'm there.
And I said yes.
All right.
And they lived happily ever after.
Yeah, I was getting nervous. Like, are they going to end up together or not?
We did. We dated for about a year before he proposed, and he was on the road the whole time. So with the traveling team, he was campus to campus for that 2 semesters of college, and I was at OU. And so we did a long distance relationship where he would write emails or we'd have phone calls, stuff like that. And so, but then we did have weekends here and there that we'd spend together. And in a year, we were engaged and married 4 months later.
Wow.
Can you guys I want to pause real quick. At this point in your story, you are not only, part of what is attracting you to each other is your mutual commitment to the mission field, going on the mission field in the future. So can you talk real quick about a call to missions? What was that like for you guys personally? What was your experience with that? How do you know the difference between a mere fascination and a call to go?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So can I read a quote this is from the New Zealand Baptist newspaper. They have Baptists in New Zealand. It's a periodical. The author is talking about this. They've heard about this missionary call thing, and this is what they write. I learned at this conference that there was this fearful thing called a call thing that could strike without warning at any time. Missionaries would describe how their lives had been proceeding on a normal, happy course until whammo, God afflicted them with this call thing. As far as I could gather, a call was a bit like having a stroke, a sudden rearrangement of your cerebral software so that instead of wanting to be normal and happy, you wanted to be a missionary. So I think that description from the New Zealand Baptist periodical is what a lot of people think of when they think of a missionary call. That God does some type of miraculous manifestation, essentially to tell us to do something related to what he's already told us to do from his word. And so I'll run into people and say, if God will give me writing on the wall or spell out Morocco in my alphabet soup, then I will go if God will call. And I've made it a one-man mission to try to debunk that idea of calling. Because think about it, if 4,000 people on the planet have yet to hear the gospel, but that's what it takes to be called to mission, whose fault is it that so many people are without the gospel?
Yeah, then it would put the blame on God. Sure.
If only he loved them as much as we do, because I would go if I were called. And so I want to invite people to consider a different way of thinking of calling. First, I think it was Oswald Smith that said, if you're looking for a call, put your ear to the Bible. Where we hear God call all of his people to mission, whether we're in Tulsa or Timbuktu. And so once we get clear on that, then we can start to ask, okay, well, what's my best contribution to God's mission? Is it here or there or that other place? Is it through prayer and sending? Is it through going? And we can actually ask biblical kind of questions. So I would say, if someone, though, is wondering about their life being spent overseas, I would say there should be some type of what we call an internal call that you sense, I want to do that. I have a burden to do that. I'm not the Messiah, so not a Messiah complex, but a burden for the lost and for the unreached, for instance. But then, even probably more important is the external call, where the people around you, especially your church leaders, say, hey, John, I noticed how you're sharing your faith. You're making disciples here. Have you ever thought about doing that overseas? We're partnering with a ministry in Japan, for instance, and I'd like you to consider going on this next trip that we're taking, because you might... the Lord might be setting you apart for a ministry like that. And that kind of church-centered calling, I think, is a lot more biblical. That's what we see in Acts 13, where Paul and Barnabas are set aside by the church to be sent out. I think it sets a lot of individuals free from having to figure out if they're, them alone by themselves, figuring out, am I called?
Yeah. I think that's good, especially with what Pastor Michael has said recently in one of his sermons of, churches aren't sending people much at all anymore. And some denominations have even completely closed down their missions arm and brought everybody home. And so what's going wrong? Why are people ignoring the go and make disciples and go to all of the nations? Because that was given to every single one of us.
Yeah.
Now, the nation could be your next door neighbor, and you're meant to stay where you're planted currently, but why not you? Why not your friend who goes to youth group with you? Like, why are we not going?
Right.
So how did you guys personally feel that? Was it the burden for the lost? Did you have a wow moment?
For me, I did have kind of an awakening moment as a teenager, that it was possible, that people did this for a living, that you can serve the people of the world. I think I agree with Justin, where once someone also walked me through the scriptures to see God's heart for the world. Like, he, from the very beginning in Genesis 12, he says, Abraham, I'm going to make you a nation, and that your people, you're going to bless the nations. This is my purpose. My mission is not only just for you. Isaiah 49:6 is another. It's too small a thing just to recapture the hearts of Israel. I want to be a God for all nations. And so once someone walked at me through and went, see, this is God. This is who God is. I went, oh, well, then there's not an option. And I think there's a lot of people, if you make it so super spiritual that you need a calling or some kind of, not to knock these moments, but at a summer camp where they say, do you have that feeling inside of you that says missions? It can set us as missionaries on a pedestal as though they're a unique, gifted person. And the truth of the matter is from the very beginning, God's been using ordinary men and women who are just saying, I'm going to say yes until it's a no, instead of the opposite. That was a really important phrase that one of our mentors shares often, is instead of it being a no until it's yes, I think you guys have experienced this too, let me live as though it's a yes. Let me head in that direction until it's a no. The door closes. There's a corner that you turn, which is part of our story. And so it wasn't, there was an awakening to God's heart for the world. That was specifically something I experienced. But I wouldn't want anyone to believe that that's a supernatural thing I experienced and makes me, on this totem pole of...
Yeah, I love that, because it also, I think, helps people who don't have that feeling of like having to battle, well, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't God want me? And so, I agree with that. I think if people can just have the attitude of, yes, Lord, send me wherever that might be, and let him close doors on you, even if that's painful, but then he's directing, and you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm not going to be used. And
I think for an individual trying to discern that, it's so scary to do it alone. And so that's one of the things I'm excited about that we're doing here at Evergreen with the mission team is, what's it look like to put the church back at the center of this, so that someone who does begin to get a sense of, I could do that, or I'm starting to feel a burden for that, they can come under the care and shepherding of pastors who love them and who have kind of already vetted organizations and we're developing relationships on the field, so that this person isn't Googling, where can I go as a missionary? And just, trusting themselves to an algorithm. Instead, they're part of a body. They're the pinky or the nose or whatever. And we have a mission, but they have a part in that mission. And
that's good.
I think it just adds a lot of health and wisdom to the process. For me, I will say God used his word, and then I love stats. And so when I heard that 2% of missionaries were going to the Muslim world, that broke my heart. The Muslim world makes up 25% of the world's population, and they're getting 2% of our missionaries. Are you serious? Kind of I didn't know who Muhammad was. I didn't know the 5 pillars of Islam at that point. But just, again, said, well, God, if no one else is going that way, I'm going to head that way. Unfortunately, I didn't have I was a part of a church, but the approach to mission was still very individualistic of, okay, you figure out your call and then let us know. And so I wish I would have had more of that care around me to help me discern
Guidance.
steps
Yeah.
and get prepared.
Yeah. So after you guys got married, as you were married in 2003, you guys were still headed down this path towards missions. So what came next for you guys?
Well, we got married in 2003, and we actually joined staff with the traveling team. We thought, well, okay, we're heading to the unreached. What if the Lord might use us for a year or so to help other students get a heart for the lost and for the unreached? What if we could multiply ourselves? So it's great if 2 of us will go, but what if 20 might go because we do this mobilization? So that was the plan. And that was a lot of fun in some ways, getting to work with students. We love students. God is always, I think, doing unique things in young adults, and that's a special season of life. That was a season where Megan's anxiety resurfaced in new ways or in harder ways. Maybe because we were living out of a van and
Down by the river.
Staying in
Didn't
guest
even get to
homes
stay
every
by the
night
river. We had to move every night. Yeah, I through college. So what developed is my panic attacks seemed to be specific to late nights alone with Justin, and that sounds worse than it was, but like even just being out.
Before we were married.
Before we were married, when we were dating, I had a time where I wasn't having panic attacks, and then we started dating, and eventually they kind of popped up around specific situations. And so I thought, well, once we're married, maybe my body will stop freaking out because I'm allowed to be alone with Justin. That was my logic at the time. And they did come down. They went away for, I don't know, a year and a half, which seemed very long at the time. I was an overcomer at that time. And then we got in a van with 2 single folks, traveled campus to campus for 9 months, living, when we weren't on the road, we were living in my mom's house. And if you've ever been married, I know y'all have, and then lived in your parents' house, it was really strange. They were wonderful people, but it's a strange dynamic. And I felt unsettled all the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a safe, secure location. And it was hard, even though I loved the ministry, it was hard to be married on the road because you're staying in other people's homes. Mm-hmm. You're in a van. If we were going to have conversations, someone was in the back seat all the time. And so I just was not good at it. Mm-hmm. And one night we were staying in somebody's spare bedroom in Austin, Texas, and I started having a panic attack. And we snuck out of the house to get me to the ER so they could just give me something to help me calm down. It was devastating. And it was a devastating moment for me in ministry where, again, I'm a very determined, passionate, driven person. And this was my thorn in my side. And I was like, Lord, I can't, you've got to help me overcome this. You've got to get rid of this in Jesus' name. And so we just kind of spent some time grieving and not really having any answers at the time. The end of our time with the traveling team was a little bit rocky because of that for me. Mm-hmm. We ended up that summer going back doing the IT project. I had a little bit of trouble there, but we eventually just did a year and a half, and then we went to seminary at Gordon Conwell.
Yeah, which is on the North Shore of Boston. We felt like, well, if we want to live and serve cross-culturally, let's get out of the Bible Belt for our seminary time, at least somewhat cross-culture that way. And our first day of living in Salem, Massachusetts, we pull up to our apartment, and a man runs out of the building next door and starts yelling, "You can't park there! You can't park there!
Park your car in Harvard Yard!"
I said, "Wait, we're moving in here. We live here." "No, you can't park there. Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Arkansas." "Go back to Arkansas."
He's a very pleasant man.
It took me a while to realize that the little side street next to our apartment was sort of, it was very much asphalt side street looking thing, but it served as a parking lot for the building next door, and I was parked in the parking lot. And so that was a good welcome to the Boston area.
We're not in the South
From
anymore.
this warm-hearted man.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, "Hey, y'all, welcome. Let me just let you know."
Yeah. No.
I know you don't
That's
know
not
this.
New
So
England.
no. He was like, "Get out of here. Don't
Yeah.
even stay in the state." And
Yeah.
we're like,
Yeah.
"God loves you."
I understand it. I've got New England family, and they would say, "Yep, that's right."
Yeah, that's gotta let you know. So, but that was 3 years. It was really wonderful time of learning, growing. We had great professors. We were part of a small church plant in Salem, Massachusetts.
And this is where your son is born, isn't it?
Yes. Our 3rd year there, we have Henry.
I love to multitask. You'll hear this with Evie as well. I love to be in a seminary education and give birth at the same time.
Yes.
So when I was in labor with Henry, this is 2007, I was verbally dictating my Life of Jesus paper to Justin. And he was born the next day.
Wow.
And because, I had gone to the hospital. I thought I was in labor. They're like, "No, go home." And I was like, okay. So even though I hurt, first kid you're having, you go to those labor pains, and they told me to go home. So this must not be it.
I guess I'll do my paper.
I guess I got to write this paper. Justin. So he was born November 2007. And the year before that was a really important year because we got involved with Lausanne. The Lausanne movement is who Justin works for now, but in 2006, they had a younger leaders gathering in Malaysia. And at the time, the president of the Lausanne movement lived on our campus. And so we were nominated as younger leaders and got involved through that. Justin made more connections that he stayed in touch with, one of them being Michael O., who eventually became the CEO of Lausanne movement. But at the time, it was really neat to be at Gordon Conwell, to have Doug Birdsall, the president of the Lausanne movement, on our campus. And then we also had the Center for the Study of Global Christianity on our campus with Todd Johnson, who's a remarkable researcher and statistician, world-renowned. And so we also had a professor who was with the organization Arab World Ministries, who had spent 15 years in the Muslim world and was now teaching how to reach Muslims on our campus. So we were wheeling and dealing with some really neat connections at the time that went on to really inform and connect us to what God was calling us to in our future.
Yeah. Just real quick, Justin, can you tell us what is the Lausanne? Is it project? What is it?
It's the Lausanne movement now.
Okay.
So in 1974, Billy Graham and John Stott convened what was called the First International Congress on World Evangelization. It met in Lausanne, Switzerland, so that's where the name comes from. But they gathered 2,500 global Christian leaders, key leaders around the world, people like Ralph Winter, who we've mentioned, Francis Schaeffer, some of us may be familiar with him. And the point of the gathering was we have a mission to complete, and we need to work together to do it. A major reason why the Great Commission is unfulfilled 2,000 years after it being given is because Christians don't know how to work together. And so Lausanne was the first step at that time of bringing the global church together to partner to do things that they couldn't do or wouldn't do on their own. Some of that is providing clarity on what the mission is. So there were mission agencies shutting their doors in the 60s and 70s because they heard, there are believers in every country.
Oh,
there's a handful of believers in every country, so the Great Commission must be fulfilled. Well, if you read the Great Commission, you find out that go make disciples of all nations. In the Greek is panta ta ethne, all the ethne, where we get our word ethnicities from. And so at that 74 Congress, a guy named Ralph Winter gave an 11-minute plenary address and said the Great Commission is more about peoples than about places. There are whole ethnicities with no access to the gospel today. Still thousands of ethnicities without the Bible in their language, without any churches, even without a single missionary living among them, trying to reach them. And so that was a turning point in a lot of ways for global mission. So Lausanne, it helps to clarify the mission, but then helps the global body to partner together. Denominations, sending agencies, Christian NGOs, kingdom-minded businesses working together in different ways to advance the Great Commission.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys have your son. You hear about Lausanne. You start getting involved in it. 2008, you guys start raising support. Where were you all heading?
Yeah, we were heading to Morocco, but a lot of people who end up working in Francophone Africa, French-speaking Africa, will spend some time either in Quebec or in France to learn French, since it's a trade language in places like Morocco. The heart language is Arabic, trade language is French. So we thought we'd do a few months in France, just enough time to learn just enough French to be dangerous, while we then go to Morocco and learn Arabic. So we moved to Massy and start French school. Megan gets pregnant with Evie during that time because she likes to multitask
learn a language, and build a baby. And why not give birth in a foreign language? Doesn't everyone dream of learning the word pousse means push? That's exactly what was on my top of my vocab list. So,
yes. While we were in France, the Moroccan government began to kick out people like us, and it was happening in waves. This was 2010. And so leadership for our organization said, we don't know how many of us will be here by the time you come down. You need a plan to stay, to not transition to Morocco like you were planning.
Yeah.
And figure out a different time to enter and what you're going to do for a visa once you do. So we stayed about an extra year in France. I did an MBA during that time because the plan was to start a business in Morocco as our platform.
Morocco is the kind of place where you can't go in as a missionary. You have to have a reason to be there. You can come as a tourist, which is what we eventually did, but you have to leave every 3 months. You can't just be there because you want to be there. And so, the only way to really either you can be speaking to our aged community, retire to Morocco and be on a retirement visa, or you have to have a business.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so,
or teach, or do medical work, other platforms.
Yeah, medical, education, different platforms, but you can't just be, because the church is not there.
Yeah, Morocco is 99.8% Muslim. The king of Morocco is the defender of the faith. That is Islam, the faith. And so it is illegal to proselytize, which technically, is defined as to coerce, pay, or trick someone into converting, which no missionaries that I know have done that.
We don't want to do that.
But they've been kicked out for simply sharing the gospel, even when asked, and charged with proselytism. So that was happening. And so we stayed an extra year in France, and then after some time back in the U.S., eventually made it to Morocco. And by that time, Arab World Ministries, which we had joined, merged with another organization called Pioneers. So we were Pioneers missionaries in Morocco, in Marrakesh, part of an awesome team. Excited. We felt like we'd spent 10 years just to get there.
Just to get there. And you're finally there.
Yep.
And then, Megan, your panic attacks come back.
Yeah, it was weird because we had been in France for 2 years and I hadn't had any trouble. It wasn't easy. We had hard things, but I was able to cope. It seemingly was different in Morocco. And so I wasn't expecting it. I had this assumption that God had given grace of, removing that, because he, of course, needed me in Morocco because I was going to save everybody. I had the mindset of a Messiah complex, very much so, coming from just a passion for Jesus, but also my own flesh wanting to do for God what only he can do. And so when we got there, I started to have panic attacks, not during the night, not when I was alone with just, not in the way that I had managed to learn a behavior, how to take care of myself. I'd learned how to take care of myself with panic attacks up until this point. So this is 2012. And so they started being different and unexpected. And it was exhausting. Like, so you have a panic attack. If you've had one, you know this. It's physically exhausting. I had a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. And I lived in a foreign country where we walked everywhere, and we had you just can't be exhausted. I mean, living there is exhausting because you're speaking 2 different languages. You're buying fruit and veg that you're not used to. Everything is different. And we had prepared for that. We had gone through the cross-cultural training weeks of, okay, this is what to expect. This is what cross-cultural fatigue looks like. We were ready with all the things that you could be ready with. You could not have trained or been more ready than we were. And yet my body was tired. It was at a point of breaking that I couldn't overcome. So had been there 6 months, I think, when I finally reached out to our member care at Pioneers. And we had, as I mentioned earlier, we had to leave the country every 3 months. So on our second exit, we went into Southern England, where our organization has a mission home, like this beautiful coastal home. And there was a retreat time for us. And they brought over member care staff to meet with us, all of us who needed any kind of care. And we met with them and explained this was what's going on. And they said, okay, well, let's set up a relationship with a counselor for you. We think routine, once the kids get back in school and you're back in school, because it had been summer, maybe that will help kind of lessen some of the...
it was 120 degrees every day in Morocco.
The desert, hot, no air conditioning. So that sounded reasonable. That made sense to me in a practical way. And so we returned in August, and I started meeting with a wonderful man who had been a missionary kid himself and worked with missionaries. And so it got sort of better. It's a little fuzzy now, but we then had our third exit, November. It was around Henry's 5th birthday. And so we were leaving, and my counselor was going to be, miraculously, he's going to be in Southern England. We were going to go back to the mission house there. And so I could see him face to face, which everybody knows. We were on Skype back then. There wasn't Zoom, it was Skype. So Skype's great. Man, thank God for that. But face to face, person to person.
It's different.
There was a level of vulnerability I could get to, because my kids weren't right there, or a number of things. And when I was in that space with him, I really broke down and realized how much I felt like God must be disappointed in me, because I knew, but I didn't want to admit that I couldn't do this anymore. I wasn't gonna recover. I was gonna be drowning to stay in the context and the physical experience that I was having. I say physical because I can't say that there were things that I was anxious about. Truly, I didn't have anxious thoughts necessarily, except about having a panic attack. I was always panicking about having a panic attack. And so it seemed looking back, very physiological, not necessarily I wasn't faithless or, worried my kids are going to... Actually, I was very naive at how great my kids were doing. I didn't think about all the horrible things that could be happening in the school that they were going to or in the country. It wasn't those things. I felt very safe environmentally, but my body was not coping. And my despair came because I knew we had spent 10 years preparing, did everything that you're supposed to do. And I was about to have to disappoint my husband, my supporters. So we raised support for this. We had people giving thousands and thousands of dollars for us to be able to be there. Disappoint my team. Our team was amazing. They had gone through so much, losing teammates through the expulsion, and it was really tricky for them to invite another family in. But ultimately, I realized that I was afraid God was disappointed in me because I had made the false assumption and didn't even know I was doing it, I don't think, but that he required me to be there and suffer in such a way that I was miserable. Like suffering had to be to a point where I'd be disappointing him for letting my suffering get the best of us and not be on the mission field. It meant that losing that ground for the Lord, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody was saying that to me. We had an amazing counselor, amazing member care, amazing team. And so what it became was testing the Lord for me. God, everyone's telling me you still love me. I don't know that right now. And truly, it became the point where I experienced the gospel for myself in the most miraculous way. So I began to believe and understand that God doesn't need me, meaning I don't have to do anything. If I never got out of bed, it would never make him love me less. And if I got out of bed, it wouldn't make him love me more. In fact, I was lovable at my worst. He chose me then. And so in the most wasteful time and wasteful way, God pursued me to the end of me on the mission field. It's not the plan you have, but it's the plan God had to transform my heart into one that believed him for who he was and rested in his grace for me. I think it's really helpful to hear how Justin responded to me when I came to him, and I think he was waiting on me to let him know. I mean, but it was going to be hard for me to make the decision, the final decision. And so he just said, we can serve the Lord anywhere. This is not the point. Morocco's not the point. It does not matter where we are.
Yeah. Was it your counselor? Did he advise you that you guys needed to leave, or?
Nope. In my memory, there was just a process that we went through, and I was like, I came to the end of that hyper responsibility kind of notion that I had developed for all my life of feeling obligated, responsible, the weight, the burden of I have to do this, and then coming to confront I can't do this. And I think he mostly said, you don't have to do this. He was helping me go to dissect that broken way of seeing myself and my responsibility with God's actually in charge here. Morocco is going to see Jesus because God's will is that there be people from every tongue, tribe, people, nation that know him. So he will continue to pursue Moroccans until there is a remnant there in Megan Schell. That is not up to you. That is up to God. You can let God have his responsibility there. You just have to trust and trust him.
Yeah. And in the end, hearing how she was doing, I kind of looked over how we were doing in the sense of we're trying to learn a third language. I'm starting to write a business plan. We're trying to be members of our team. But for her, many days getting out of bed wasn't an option, or at least not for very long.
And you're trying to raise children.
And so we kind of looked at, okay, can we do here what we've been sent to do here? No. Well, how can we get healthy here so that we can do that? It doesn't seem like that's going very fast, at least. Would it be better then to get to a place where a lot of those things don't exist so we can get better, get healthy? And so I think I remember saying, hey, I will make the decision. And I think we were getting ready to leave England, and I just said, I'm going to make the decision that we leave. Because, one, I knew she couldn't make that decision, and also that I was responsible to be the one to make that decision. And
So how long were you guys then on the mission field?
So we got to France in 2009. We left Morocco in 2013, the beginning of 2013. So 3.5 years with a visit back to the U.S. in the middle of that for some months. So our plan was 30 or 40 years in Morocco, bury us in the Sahara Desert when we're done. That'd be great.
So
But
we
it
were
was
pretty lost.
a fraction of that.
Yeah, we were pretty lost in the moment of saying, well, because we'd
Now
sold
what?
everything, we left
Yeah.
everything. We didn't have a plan when we made the decision to go back. And it was scary, but God had a plan. And a few days after we sent a newsletter announcing our return, Justin got an email from Michael O., who was at the time in Japan serving at a seminary there. And Michael O. asked a strange question. He asked, "What's your Myers-Briggs?" And we went, "What? Why?" But he answered, and eventually Michael said, "Well, this isn't public news, but I'm being vetted for becoming the next CEO of the Lausanne movement, and I'm building a team of people that I want to help me in that role, and I think you'd be a great asset to the team." And when I personally, this is one of my gifts, when I saw that, I was like, this is the Lord. Like, this is God. You've been a mobilizer with the traveling team. You have an MBA executive experience. Now, you've been on the field. I mean, you've had some real cross-cultural exposure and experience, and they need someone like you. He's also a writer. He's just a great communicator. I was like, oh my gosh, we already knew a lot about Lausanne. And so it was another way God was being so generous to bring us the next step right away. Like, we were not expecting, it was nowhere on the radar, but it was in God's plan. And so, it was like that, closing a door, another one opened right away. And so when we came back, January of 2013, I was depressed. And Justin, we also lost a lot of our support because people were supporting us to be missionaries to Muslims.
Right.
And that's their intention. And we totally understood that they want to invest in that. We were no longer going to be directly doing that. And so he had to hit the road, not only traveling for Lausanne, but also building our support team back up. And so it was a really hard but safe return. I don't know how to put it. We were at my mom's like every night for dinner. She was our safety zone. My kids could go there and I could check out.
When you returned, were you feeling better?
No. I didn't feel better for a really long time.
So it took us 7 years to find out that Megan had a kidney that was slowly deteriorating. And each year it was getting worse. And the other kidney was doing all the kidney function, so that's why they never found it when they would have her do a pee test or blood test. She went to the ER with abdominal pain, and they saw it was 5 times too big and was about to burst. But it had already been leaking, sorry for the image, rancid urine throughout her body for years.
Wow.
So
do they think that was causing the panic attacks?
No one would say that. I think they're not necessarily directly related, because I now have thyroid issues and hormone issues that are more likely what I consider related to the anxiety, but it definitely wasn't not contributing. Your body is sending you signals.
Yeah.
We think that it was a birth defect. I was 5 weeks early, a preemie baby. So what was happening with the kidney was the ureter was not voiding the fluid on the kidney my whole life, likely, to its fullest extent. And so that's the theory we're going with. We can't know, actually, except for what we found at the end.
The doctor said this condition could explain everything that you've felt. Or it could just make everything else even worse. So if there's some other underlying issue.
Yeah.
it would have certainly made that
Which
10
is
times worse.
true, because I also had gallstones at the same time. When I went in 2020, everyone's favorite year, I went in, finally got a CT scan. They saw the kidney, but they also saw my gallbladder was full of stones. I couldn't feel the pain of those gallstones until I had my kidney removed. And once my kidney was removed in October of 2020, I was in so much pain from the gallbladder that I had to have it removed a month later. And so, yeah, the kidney dominated the fatigue, the swelling, the pain that I had been experiencing. Once we got home, that stuff increased. I'm sure the anxiety and stuff were in there as well. But what we look back on now, that and our son eventually was diagnosed autistic, high functioning autistic. We realized that coming home from Morocco was the mercy of God for those particular things. He was in a Moroccan school with Moroccan teachers, with Moroccan insight. They do not discipline the same way. They don't have the insights probably that we do on special education, that sort of thing. We would not have seen that because of the way that he kind of presents his autism in Morocco. It definitely would have been a horrible experience being even sicker in Morocco. And so even though we said it was devastating for me to leave, knowing that that was the plan I had for my life, God has rescued us from things that we couldn't have predicted. And we continue to serve the global church. And what God has done too is taken my pain and my experience and used it in counseling others. Since getting home from the mission field in 2013, God has brought me a dozen women who have been on the field and come home broken over different reasons. And it has been a great honor to be able to share the gospel with missionary women in such a way that they know that God is for them, that God is near to the brokenhearted, that the comfort that he has given me, as 2 Corinthians 1 talks about, I've been able to comfort others with that. And so the worst days of my life continue to be redeemed by the Lord. It's led me into training to become a biblical counselor. It allows me to help my own kids who go through various sufferings. And so even though it's kind of painful to remember, it's painful to think about those moments, I am more overwhelmed by the goodness of God and how he uses suffering in his upside down kingdom to bring life. He's brought fruit, not just in my life, in our family, and in others' lives.
Yeah. Justin, can you speak a little bit on what it's been like as the husband of caring for your wife as she battles health issues and anxiety and depression and all those things?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say our culture says that when people stop being functionally helpful for you and meeting your wants and desires, the plan is you need to just discard them and do what makes you happy. And that is as far from the gospel as you can get. I'm grateful that I think it was just the Lord giving me a real heart to be a servant to Megan and to our kids during this season, that long season. I didn't do it perfectly. There were days that were harder than others. I would say what I did well was the service side. I cooked dinner almost every day for however many years. I was daddy in charge a lot of evenings. If Megan couldn't homeschool that day, it was daddy school day. And I did that well. I think that I didn't walk with her as well during that season. I did a great job keeping the kids from waking her up, but I didn't do a good job of going in and just being with her and letting her speak and cry and feel like, so someone else's presence is here. So I can imagine that season being very lonely for her, even though all of her needs, practical needs were being handled. And so I wish I had done that better. I would say during that season, there were times when I looked to either television or sometimes alcohol to comfort myself. Never super duper drinking, but just enough to allow it to do for me what really God wanted to do for my heart. And so, that I think for me, that if you're helping care for someone, your idols are going to be exposed too, because you're put into this hot house where whatever's there, it's gonna grow. The weeds are gonna grow. And so for me, it exposed even my own relying on myself. I'll take care of Megan and the kids, and I'm going to do my job. I'm going to raise this support back up, and I'm going to do this ministry. So if there are folks going through, whether it's the husband or the wife caring for the other, my thought is, care for their practical needs, but press into the relationship as well. And also make sure that others are coming alongside of you and saying, hey, how's your soul? No, really. Stop lying. I mean, if it's always good, you're not the Messiah, so you're lying. So it was, there were hard days.
Can you guys both, I mean, that's in both your stories now, this kind of self-reliance, independence, toxic independence. Can you talk a little bit about how you fight that? I mean, what do you, if someone were to recognize that in their own life, what do you do?
Yeah, there's a curriculum that's really helped us. It's called Sonship. It's put out by a ministry called Surge, which is actually a renewal ministry and a mission agency. And one of the main points of the curriculum is the gospel says we are adopted children of God, which means we have a Father who cares for us, who provides for us, who loves us, who delights in us. But in our flesh, we tend to slide towards what they call orphan behavior. What does an orphan do? Think of a street urchin that comes to mind from a movie. Well, he's got to be savvy, right? Because he's got to take care of himself. He's going to take advantage of others. Why? Because he's got to take care of himself. There's no one else to provide. He doesn't have a good father that's going to protect him, take care of him. And that's what Christians slide into so easily when we wake up and say, I better have a quiet time this morning or God's going to be disappointed in me. Okay. So you're saying that your quiet time is going to top off the blood of Jesus? It almost covered enough, but you need to add something. And so we in subtle ways and in big ways, we tend towards that kind of orphan behavior in the flesh. And so I think for us, we've realized where we've not trusted the goodness of God. We've not trusted that He's going to provide, that He cares, that He is who He says He is. I still remember a moment a few years ago praying, and before I could stop myself, I was praying out loud, but I was alone. Before I could stop myself, I prayed out loud, God, I feel like you're just putting up with me. And immediately felt a conviction with the idea of what kind of father do you think I am? Kind of behind that conviction. What kind of father do you think I am? That I'm just putting up with you, that I'm tolerating my children. What kind of father is that? And for me, that highlighted just what we think about God, what we believe about God, how much of a practical impact that has. Yeah. Every day wondering if I'm doing enough. I talked with the youth group last week.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was trying to help them see is how practical theology is. And when we're talking about what we believe about God and about ourselves, that's theology, and the kind of day in and day out impact it can have. So my orphan behavior was exposed by Megan's suffering, by us losing half of our support overnight almost, and by needing to take care of kids and the hard things of life.
Yeah, I would agree. The heart is where we all manufacture our own idols. And I am never going to be completely without sin of self-reliance. That is just the nature of being a sinner. But saved by grace means I'm free to admit I'm going through a season right now where I don't know anybody that would know this about me, but my pride is being hit. God is dealing with my pride, exposing my pride right now. I'm never not going to be prideful in the sense of, completely delivered until my sanctification is complete. But what Justin's saying is so true for me. I fight for the gospel to be true in my life, that when I am still experiencing panic attacks, when I'm experiencing that, where do I go in my mind? Where can I feast in those moments? My flesh wants to tell me, see, you're not doing enough. See, it must be because you didn't have a quiet time, or you didn't pray enough, or it wants to be the accuser. The accuser is never on vacation. He is always there. And where there's a weakness, there's an exposure to that. But also the Spirit is there in our weakness. As Romans 8 talks about, that when we are feeling weak, that the Spirit comes, and He is the one who knows the mind of Christ. He delivers us from our flesh into the Spirit. And the Spirit, what does the Spirit produce in us? Fruit, like peace. Now, peace doesn't mean it has to be a feeling, but it's a promise that I'm hoping in, that there is nothing I can do in this moment, that God, like He said, if I understand that God is my Father, one, admitting that I have pride, He's not surprised. He's ready with His kindness to refine and sanctify that. When I am upset or despairing, He's a comforter. He's not an accuser. And if I think He's an accuser, I need to reorient myself to the good truth. There's nothing I've done to either save myself or condemn myself. In fact, there is no condemnation for me. And so I get to have a relationship with a Father who we have in sonship, there's a cross chart. So as I begin to more deeply understand how sinful I am capable of being, the grace of God deepens of how much His grace covers, and that cross grows to be this giant, insurmountable thing. Nothing can overcome the cross. My sin, Justin's sin against me, anybody's sin against, none of it overcomes the love and the grace of God towards me. And so I will continue to fight with being self-reliant. So I will never tell you that I'm not really proud of myself. And there will be times when that comes out, because it's not just temptation, I'm owning it. But what I've learned is that's okay. That's okay. In Christ, I'm free from it being, I'm not a slave to it any longer. It's no longer what rules me. It's just something that continues to be refined in me. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did we get here? How did you guys get to Evergreen?
Well, we were part of another church here in town for about 7 years. And it was a young church. I was like the third or fourth oldest dude there. So imagine if Reach...
And he's not old. He's 45
now. But imagine if Reach was about 150 people, and that was the whole church. So that's about the age group we're talking about.
Yeah.
So a lot of opportunity to mentor, disciple, teach, which was great. But as our kids were getting into youth age, they were also encountering the forces in our world that were bubbling up in the 2020, 2021 era of redefining reality. Evie was in 4th grade and had experienced some bullying from girls who wanted her to identify, other 9-year-olds wanting her to identify as something other than a little girl, and who had a crush on little boys. And so we were like, okay, we talked to the leaders of that church and said, hey, what do we think about a youth group? because we can't be the only ones speaking God's truth to our kids. We need community. And they were kind of like, probably we're 3 years away, 4 years away from that.
Because everyone else was having their first, second babies when we were at 10 and 12. And
so, yeah, in conversations with the leadership there, just eventually said, okay, it seems like the Lord's moving us out. So let's find a church where the Bible is at the center of what they do. And that includes the Bible as the center of what they do with students, with young people. And so we began to kind of had a short list. I'd met Scott Meeks through the Tulsa Metro Baptist Network here in the city. And so Evergreen was on our list. And we wanted to start with trying to find somewhere close to our home. We were driving, it was only like 30 minutes each way, probably. So it wasn't super long, but if there's something closer to our house, that'd be great. So we had some unimportant things we were looking for, and then very important things we were looking for. And so we visited in
miraculously,
December?
no, it was like April, because we joined in the summer of 2021. December, I just had my gallbladder out. We weren't going nowhere.
That's right.
But what was amazing when we first visited Evergreen, again, we have tween teens at the time. They were like, "Oh, I liked it there," and I was like, "We're going back. That has to be, if your kid who's been in lockdown and in transition." And Evie's experience was just really discouraging, and they go to a strange church they've not been to, which is way bigger than they used to, and they say they like it. You're like, that's the sign. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
We did try a couple other places, wonderful places, but I also met with Nikki Boyd because Evie, in particular, is going into 5th and 6th grade, and I loved the Ramp 56 idea, and I loved it for Evie at that time. It's just a remarkable, unique gift for families to help even navigate what are we going to talk about with our kids? How do we introduce the ideas of spiritual disciplines or who Jesus is in a more concrete manner at this age when they're starting to ask real questions? That sold me completely. She was like the real deal, not just childcare.
Yeah.
The youth, this discipleship emphasis, I just was so thankful to see that was real. Again, it wasn't just programming, it was life on life. And so Evergreen has grown so much even since we got here, but it stayed consistent with the investment in the youth and in discipleship. And I continue to be just more and more grateful for that heart for the body.
Yeah. Well, I think that we could continue to talk to you guys a lot longer because, Justin, you have an office here. Like, I don't know if you're technically on staff or not, but you do help Evergreen with strategizing with missions, and you work with Lausanne and are helping our church in order to continue with missions and staying mission-minded. But I think we might keep that for people to contact you and learn more about it. And as our church continues to move forward with a missions mind, you guys can be a couple that people can reach out to that have been on the field and to get information of if their heart is being stirred for missions. You guys would be a great resource for anybody.
Yeah.
Something else real quick that I want to give you a chance to just mention for people to reach out to you about. Can you very quickly summarize what you do with Union?
Yeah. Union is a ministry in the UK that has a school of theology, Union School of Theology. And here in Tulsa, we run a Union learning community. So guys and gals can do their seminary studies here in Tulsa in community. It's a world-class faculty, deep theology, but delivered warm-heartedly. So a balance of the head, heart, and hands missionally. And so if someone was looking at seminary studies, they want to do a master's or even what would be a THM in the U.S., a master's of theology. We have those here in Tulsa. You don't need to move. It's about half or a third as cheaper than most American options, believe it or not.
Mm.
And you get to do it with others who are here serving the Lord, not wanting to necessarily uproot their families or leave their churches to do that. So
That's cool. That's a cool opportunity.
yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I want to ask the question for our people who are listening today. If you find yourself in a place where you're battling with how God sees you, like, I think God is dependent on me and my calling and how I'm serving him, what might you want to say to somebody who is battling with their worth and their value to God?
Mm-hmm.
There's no shame in that. Every person I know has at some point questioned that. That is a very typical question we're asking in the world. Like, does he like me? Does she like me? What am I worth? Even in marriages, how much does my husband care for me based on actions or inactions? We're trying to take the temperature of where we stand with people all the time. And the remarkable news of the gospel, it's kind of just hard to believe that there's nothing we have done that changes God's mind about us, whether it's good or bad. And so the struggle is real because it's hard to relate to. Even parents, we are not great to our kids sometimes. We have to apologize. And so the perfect father doesn't exist except for the one that's in the scriptures. And so what I would say is get to know the Lord for who he says he is. Test him at it. Say, God, it says that you provide. God, it says you comfort. Lord, you are faithful. God, I need you to show me your faithfulness. I need you to show me your love. And he is pleased to, Justin loves to say this phrase, to show up and show off. He's not going to be average on how he fulfills what you're asking him to do. He's going to show up and he's going to show off in an extravagance because that's who he is. And so if you're worried about God being disappointed with you, where is that coming from? Where does that message come from? Is it from the scriptures? I would challenge you that it doesn't. It is a life-changing thing to come to terms with that God loves you fully, unconditionally. And so another thing to do is find someone to disciple you, someone who's going to help you come out with the words that are behind what your actions, your behaviors say one thing, but it's from the heart. Why are you anxious about that? Why are you angry about that? It could be because you're believing something that is untrue about God and about yourself. Because you are in Christ. And so it takes time. It's a process. For me, it was a process, but God showed up and he showed off. And I still look back and no longer, the tears aren't as much about the pain as they are about the mercy that I tested God and he continues to show up and show off.
Yeah. There's more mercy in God than there is sin in us. And we can't believe that, but there's more grace in God than there is sin in us. We are great sinners. He is a greater Savior. And so going to the Word, seeing that there, for me, the Lord has used a few authors, a few resources that have really helped me. One that comes to mind right now is Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland, a book called Gentle and Lowly. That just unpacks God's heart for sinners and strugglers. And that's all of us, so there's good news. In fact, I love to remind people that Jesus he was given a nickname in Luke chapter 8, I think. He's given a nickname. You friend of sinners. He was given it by his enemies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they thought it was an insult. You friend of sinners. What a great name. And so if you're worried that, oh, I'm a sinner. Well, good news. Jesus is the friend of sinners. So I'd love to recommend some resources.
Always.
Love to talk with people that are struggling with this because I feel like it's something that's on our hearts.
Well, thank you guys so much for meeting with us today and sharing your story.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, we're excited for people to hear it and to hopefully strike up a conversation with you and get to know you more. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you would like more information about our church, please visit our website at evergreenbc.org.